a visionary architect's dreams of building a futuristic utopia come to a halt when the corrupt mayor opposes his extravagant plans for the city. In the city of New Rome, Cesar, a renowned architect, stands atop a tall skyscraper and takes a step off the ledge. However, before he falls to the busy street below, he stops time, and he hovers over the edge while everything around him grinds to a stop. After the man steps back onto the ledge, he snaps his fingers and unfreezes time. Meanwhile, Roman elites, including the mayor's daughter Julia Cicero and her friend Clodia, dance and indulge in illicit substances at an extravagant party. Then, Clodia's brother Clodio kisses Julia's leg while she sits on a fake horse in the middle of the dance floor, but she pushes him away. Outside the club, Commissioner Stanley Hart picks up the mayor's daughter to take her home. After she enters the vehicle, the smitten Clodio professes his love, but she indifferently brushes it off. Concurrently, Mayor Franklyn Cicero listens to a scathing news report about his financial problems and disappointedly sees Julia's scandalous picture in the newspaper. Later, the woman sees Cesar and his design authority team demolishing a building. When the architect stops time for a few seconds, Julia isn't affected, and she is in awe of the man's powers. After the building comes crashing down, the commissioner confronts Cesar and says the mayor won't like what he's done, so an employee explains that the site is under design authority jurisdiction. Meanwhile, news of Cicero's poll numbers dropping and the architect winning the Nobel Prize for inventing the revolutionary building material megalon are reported across the city. In the car, Caesar's driver and assistant, Fundy, answers a call from Wow Platinum, a TV presenter and the architect's lover. However, the boss declines the call, prompting the employee to come up with a lie explaining why he can't talk to her at the moment. Even though the mayor opposes Caesar's plan for New Rome, the architect has the financial support of his uncle Hamilton Crassus III, the world's richest man. That evening, Cicero, alongside his friend Nush, presents his plan of building a casino, eliciting boos from the crowd. Moments later, the architect arrives and says he wants to build the futuristic utopia of Megalopolis entirely out of indestructible megalon so it may last long after they're dead. However, Nush interrupts and says the material is unsafe and they should stick to concrete and steel. Then, Cicero states that what the citizens need is something that can provide immediate financial gain, but Caesar argues that the casino will only encourage people to spend money that they don't have, leading to the demise of civilization. When the architect continues to argue, the mayor leans in and threateningly implies that the man poisoned his wife and caused her disappearance. So Caesar reminds Cicero that he was the prosecuting district attorney at the time and knows that he was acquitted. While attending a fashion show, Julia tells Clodia how much she wants to take down the architect for humiliating her father in public. Concurrently, while Wow and Cesar make love, she says she wants their relationship to go public because her ratings are going down. When she sees how disinterested he seems, the woman professes her love. However, he remembers his late wife Sunny and says she should never marry for love, cutting their intimate moment short. After the man walks away, Wow turns on the TV and watches her flirty interview with Hamilton. The next day, Julia drops by Caesar's office to confront him about his spat with her father, but she eventually admits that she wants to try and make the two men reach an understanding by learning under the architect's tutelage. However, the man says just because she finished 1 year of medical school and comes from a prestigious family, she isn't entitled to his knowledge. Just as she's about to leave, Julia reveals that she witnessed him using his time-stopping powers, much to his surprise. Intrigued, Caesar asks the woman to close her eyes and imagine the future, and she describes a city where its people learn, prosper, and grow together. Later during the mayor's parade, Cicero expresses his displeasure upon learning of his daughter's decision to work for the enemy. Meanwhile, Clodia calls over Huey, a tuba player, who then excitedly leaves with a woman. That evening, the architect works on his design plans for Megalopolis, but memories of his late wife continue to haunt him. In her apartment, Julia reviews her father's files on Sunny's murder case. On one of the newspaper clippings, she sees a theory that Caesar's late wife was poisoned via an insulin overdose. As a distraction from his troubled mind, the architect goes on a drive around the city with Fundy. Concurrently, the curious Julia tails the man's car, hoping to find answers to her many questions about Sunny's mysterious death and disappearance. Unbeknownst to the woman, Clodio spots her from the adjacent vehicle and stares lovingly. Eventually, Julia watches the architect buying flowers in a rough part of the city and wonders who they're for. The woman follows Caesar into an apartment bedroom. Then, she sees him leaving the flowers on the side table and kissing the imaginary revolutionary Sonny, making her realize that he still loves his late wife. The next day, the man takes Julia onto a high landing overlooking the city. She asks which institution he'd like to preserve the most in his utopia, and he says marriage, much to her bemusement. In the next few weeks, Wow spends more time with Hamilton, and they eventually marry. During the lavish wedding reception, which all the Roman elites are invited to, the poor citizens of the city watch the red carpet arrivals behind a fence. Later, the architect presents the megalon dress he designed for chaste teen pop star Vesta Sweetwater. When the mayor arrives, the crowd rains disappointed boos as he walks along the red carpet. As the event starts, Clodio asks his uncle if he signed a prenuptial agreement, and Hamilton says he may be old, but he isn't stupid. The nephew wonders why the man married the TV presenter, and the latter explains that Wow keeps him young. Moments later, Cesar proposes a congratulatory toast to the newlyweds before greeting his mother, Constance. For the guests' entertainment, the hosts stage chariot races and wrestling matches. When she sees the architect using illicit substances, Julia asks why he pretends to be bad, so he explains that if he pretends to be good, no one will take him seriously. Concurrently, Cicero asks his wife Teresa if she thinks their daughter is dating Cesar, but the woman doesn't believe so. Julia follows her boss around the party as he grows more and more inebriated. Meanwhile, Clodio and Huey head to the control room and order the producer to play the contents of a thumb drive for the grand finale. Soon, Vesta performs a song about her chastity, and the ringmaster asks the wealthy guests to generously donate whatever amount they can to support the pop star's purity pledge. Suddenly, a video of Vesta and Cesar making love plays on the jumbotron, shocking the audience. The furious and disheartened guests boo the singer and call her a liar for all her dishonest claims. Chaos ensues as the crowd jumps over the barriers, prompting security to step in. To sway the people's opinion in his favor, Cicero grabs a microphone and calls for the architect's resignation. Concurrently, a man attacks Cesar, and after he knocks his opponent out, he snorts a substance and falls to the floor. Later, Julia finds the unconscious architect and she and Fundy sneak him out through a back door. However, the police order them to pull over and the commissioner says they're arresting the man because of his unlawful actions with a teenager. Even though Julia insists it was all a setup, the cops handcuff Cesar and take him away. Concurrently, Clodio celebrates successfully enacting his revenge plan on his cousin. Hours later, Julia and Clodia sneak into the city archives to find proof that could exonerate her boss. The next day, the woman visits her father and shows him the pop star's birth certificate proving that she's 23 years old. However, the man says even though the document absolves the architect of his sins legally, what he did still changed the public's perception of him morally. He forbids his daughter from telling anyone the information she discovered, but she doesn't care if she's going against her father's orders. Later, the woman arrives at the billionaire's home and Wow welcomes her in. In the elevator, the TV presenter makes it clear that Hamilton, his bank, and Cesar all belong to her. Meanwhile, the billionaire tells Clodio that he doesn't trust him and thinks he was responsible for the attack on the architect. The nephew feigns ignorance and asks if he's still on the list of heirs, but the uncle says he'll have to prove himself worthy first. Eventually, news reports clear Cesar's name after exposing Vesta's real age and stating that the paparazzi video was proven doctored and inauthentic through forensic examination. Days later, Cesar tells Julia that he lost his power and can no longer control time. He adds that he didn't murder his wife, but he believes his obsession with his work drove her to take her own life. So the woman assures him that Sonny was proud to be his wife. The architect tries to stop time, but it doesn't work. So Julia tells him to try again, but to do it for her. The pair hold hands and he successfully freezes time, making him realize that he's fallen in love with a woman. They share a passionate kiss, and Cesar wonders if his powers now only work when they're together. That night, Cicero wakes up after having a dream of a hand-shaped cloud grabbing the moon, which he considers a bad omen. Soon, Julia incorporates Megalon into the healthcare industry by creating splints made from the material. One day, the couple visits Constance, and the mother passive-aggressively expresses how disappointed she is with her son despite his many achievements. Through witnessing the strained interaction, Julia realizes that many of the man's insecurities and issues stem from his mother's constant disapproval. That night, Cesar tells the woman that she inspires and motivates him every day. Concurrently, Clodio sees an angry crowd protesting against the architect because his dream of Megalopolis caused them to lose their homes. The man thinks he can use the ordinary citizens' disdain for his cousin as a way to build notoriety as an opposing force. Then, he addresses the crowd and sells them on the promise to be their savior from the oppressive elites. One evening, Nush tells the mayor about Clodio's growing popularity, which they can use to their advantage. Days later, Jason informs Cicero that there's a possibility the satellite Carthage could crash in the city. The predictions prove to be correct, and the falling debris destroys a significant portion of New Rome. In a press conference, Caesar assures the skeptical public that a better world is possible as long as the majority accepts his bold concept of Megalopolis. One day, Julia realizes that the architect continues to dwell on the past, especially his actions which he thinks contributed to Sonny's demise. While cuddling in bed, the woman reveals that she's pregnant, and the elated man says they should get married. To try and get her father to change his mind about Megalopolis, Julia takes her parents to the construction site. The mayor remains unimpressed by Caesar's extravagant plan, but his daughter believes he'll come around soon enough. During a card game, the two men continue their debate about whether the planned utopia is immune from the same fate as history's many failed civilizations. Then, Julia announces her pregnancy, and upon seeing the disappointed look on her father's face, asks if he thinks that she'd ever fall in love with someone evil. Seconds later, Cicero rises to his feet and wordlessly leaves the room. The architect says they should fight for what they love, but the conflicted woman knows that she's breaking her father's heart. Soon, Clodio garners support from the masses and runs for alderman. During a rally, he hears someone in the crowd yell Caesar's name, so he angrily walks away. That evening, the mayor pays the architect an unexpected visit. He admits that he's attacked the man for many years, but he begs him to break up with his daughter. In exchange, Cicero's willing to hand over a signed confession stating that he was dishonest during the prosecution and that Sonny didn't disappear because her body eventually resurfaced as Jane Doe. The mayor says that it'd break Julia's heart to know that her father was complicit in accusing an innocent man, so he can keep the confession as an insurance policy in case he ever goes against the architect again. Before he leaves, Cicero says he'll give the man 3 days to think about his decision. The next day, Wow tells Caesar that they can still be together in secret, and she'll even steal the bank from her husband to give to him. However, the indifferent man shoots down her offer and walks away, confounding the TV presenter. Later, Wow begins manipulating the billionaire into slowly gaining control over the bank and freezing the architect's accounts. Through their access to the media, reports of the dangers of megalons spread throughout the city, sowing seeds of paranoia among civilians. That evening, a young fan approaches Caesar's car to ask for an autograph. Suddenly, the boy takes out a gun and shoots the unsuspecting man. Before the police can catch him, the child gets in Huey's car and they flee the scene. The panicked Julia tells the cops to help them, while Fundy checks the back seat to see if his boss is alright. In the operating room, the doctors use Megalon to rebuild the architect's skull. Concurrently, Clodio confronts Huey because his plan of gunning down Caesar turned the man into a martyr. When he finally wakes up, the man tells Julia that he discovered the principles of Megalon trying to save Sonny's life. Caesar remembers the fateful day when his late wife came home accusing him of having an affair. He tried to follow her, but she drove her car off the bridge and died in the water below. Soon, the architect heads to his uncle's house to ask why his accounts were frozen. Clodio sees the bandaged man and jokes that he wishes he'd been the one to shoot him. When Wow subtly implies that she froze the accounts, Caesar removes his bandages and shows her his newly reconstructed face. In awe, the woman falls to her knees and says he can have all the money if he leaves Julia and chooses her instead. Suddenly, Hamilton appears and says he doesn't know anything about the frozen accounts. The next day, Wow and Clodio secretly meet to do the deed and devise a plan. She points out that she signed a prenuptial agreement, which means the only way to steal Hamilton's assets is via takeover. The woman tells the smitten man that he'll ask his uncle to become interim CEO of the bank. However, when he hands Hamilton the term sheet to sign, the billionaire sees that he wants to appoint himself as both interim CEO and chairman. The old man deduces that his nephew's planning a takeover, and the immense stress causes him to have a stroke, and he collapses to the floor. Soon after the baby's birth, Fundy officiates Caesar and Julia's wedding. Meanwhile, Wow and Clodio continue their planned takeover and install a new board, successfully removing Hamilton as the CEO of the bank. Days later, Clodio riles up his supporters and orders them to storm Megalopolis and City Hall. As the mob gathers outside the building, the mayor and his family escape through the underground smug train system. In the train car, Cicero holds his granddaughter but maintains his belief that the architect is a madman who'll destroy the world before he can build a better one. The man asks his daughter if they can go back to the way things were, but she tearfully begs him to trust that she knows what she's doing with her life. Moments later, a cop informs the mayor that the rioters have been pushed back and the roads cleared, much to his relief. Concurrently, the smug Wow and Clodio taunt the bedridden billionaire. However, Hamilton reveals a bow and arrow under the blanket and shoots the woman, ending her life. Just before the frightened nephew clears the door, the billionaire shoots his backside with an arrow. Meanwhile, Cesar addresses the rioters gathered at the gates of Megalopolis and pleads with them to believe in the possibility of a better future. His words convince not only the crowd but also the mayor, who watches a live telecast of the moving speech. The next day, Hamilton says he's giving his entire fortune to the funding for Megalopolis. Clodio's former supporters realize that the man was simply using them in his quest for power, so they beat him and Huey up before stringing them upside down by their feet. During the New Year's Eve party celebrating Megalopolis' completion, the crowd shows the mayor their appreciation for his support in the building of the utopia. Cicero asks the couple that they build the future nobly, and they promise to honor his wish. As the crowd counts down to the new year, Julia stops time, but their daughter, Sunny, is seemingly the only one unaffected.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.